reading session, but it's also going to involve a discussion, because what we want to do is to find out the creative process and output of the three poets that we have joining us here. And also, may I just mention that at the back, your voice throws far away into the stage, so if you could tone down a little bit. But I think it's better if you join us in front here so we can see you and you can see us. Let me begin by welcoming the guests I have here. Dagogo Hart is an Irish-Nigerian poet. I haven't met him before, but I had seen his pictures. And the only difference I can see between looking at his pictures and looking at him himself in person is that his beard is much more luxuriant in real life than in the photos. And so this is Dagogo Hart joining us from Ireland.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
And in the middle, we have Isabire Mitch. He is joining us from Uganda. And it's really amazing because I'm amazed that he's joined us here on stage this evening. I'm really very happy. Isabire Mitch at Peja for the first time from Uganda. Welcome. Did they clip a mic? All right. So yes, so we can hear you. Yeah. Okay, have mine and then.
Yeah, I'm not still introducing.
Okay. There we go.
Okay. And then finally, our very good friend, Ghanaian, very well known Ni Aikwe Parks, joining us, I think, for maybe the third or fourth time at Peja. Am I counting right? I'd say probably fifth. Okay. And I think Ni's mic is properly off. Can somebody from the technical help us? Maybe it's turned off at the back. Hello?
Hey, yeah.
Okay, so
it was
good.
off. It had not been turned on.
Yes.
I think he expected me to say some secret things. But, yeah.
Okay, so this poetry session, and I find that every Peja I sit here on stage to talk about poetry, and it makes me very happy as a field poet myself to have conversations with people who have actually done the real thing. But there was this time that I had a conversation with someone. I'm not too sure how vested he was in literature, but he thought writing was poor form, but poetry was a complete waste of time. And he actually added was a waste of paper anytime it was published. Now, people often would say that, well, it's just a poem. I mean, it's 5 lines. How hard could that be? 10 lines. And you've wasted 3 pages just to put 10 lines in it. So there is somehow, sometimes, a poor appreciation of the work that it takes to produce a bit of poetry. And I think that poetry is actually more exacting than many other forms of writing, and which is why I wanted us to title this session Inspiration and Perspiration, because obviously there's a lot of work that would go into poetry. So I would like to start with you, Dagogo. First and foremost, tell us a little bit about yourself, your creative process, and what you think poetry means to you, and whether it is easy to put those 15 lines down, those 20 lines down, and we'll come to the performance later because you shared a few videos as well of yourself on stage, but let's have an answer to this question first.
Well, my name is Dagogo. I'm a writer, poet, performer. And I think my journey with poetry probably started with my love for music And I realized that specifically the kinds of music I liked were hip hop, country, songs that had words that were deep and personal. And it kind of when the instruments die away, I felt myself holding on to those words, and that's how my love for poetry started. Because at the end of the day, like when you strip all that away and when the words are left, that's essentially a poem. And it started from me doing music and then just stripping it all back and just concentrating on the words, and it became poetry. So I suppose now what I do is more performance based as well, to be able to express fully the emotion, because each day is different. As a performer, if you're performing a poem, some days the same poem can be angry or sad or happy. Um, and I've been lucky enough to be able to do that professionally. So for me, what those 15 lines or those 20 lines mean, it's not about the lines or the paper or even the pen or the ink that you use to write it. It's the expression of emotion with a combination of words, or even sometimes words that don't mean anything, but the combination of alphabets. When you say them out loud, they're able to transcend the paper or the meaning of the word and evoke a certain emotion or aggression or response from somebody. And that's what I love about poetry. Every time I step on stage and perform, but for me, the performer, reading the poems, it's transcendent. And then for the person receiving the poems as well, they walk up to me afterwards and they're like, this is how I felt after those words. And for me, that's beautiful. Yeah.
So let me bring you in, Mitch. I'm asking more or less the same sort of question. Your journey into becoming a poet and what the craft means to you, and finally whether it is a waste of space, those 15 lines on a page.
Somehow, I think life forced me to be a poet. I have to be honest because I'm self-taught. My background is science. Yeah, I read environmental science. I even have an MSc in environmental science. But I used to do it like a hobby or fun. But when I was finishing grad school, I had used all my savings to get this MSc, hoping it would put me in a better position to get the job I wanted. We get a new executive director, everyone is pushed out. I'm like, now what do I have to do? So yeah, I'm like, okay, let me focus on what I can do. So I put my efforts on 100% being an artist. So that's how I've been for the past 2 years. Yeah.
All right. We'll come to what inspires you, what pushes you, because obviously the fact that at a point you just didn't have a job is not enough, right? Because there are many other things that you could have done. So there's probably something was there that said poetry is the way to go.
First of all, the way I write from a witness perspective. People are living life and I'm just a witness. So I try to experience life, but writing from my POV, People are living and I'm just here and I'm watching, and that's how I try. But sometimes I'm inspired, sometimes I don't need inspiration because it is a job. I mean, if you're not inspired to go to work, won't you go to work? I'm at a point where I do it professionally, so I have to write. Whether I'm inspired or not, I have to write. But yeah, I'm inspired by life generally. Yeah.
I see. Well, thanks for that. For Nia Ikwe Parks, the second Ghanaian on the stage tonight, at least I know that you do many other forms of writing. You're an editor. So I guess the idea of writing being work is really embedded. I mean, this is when you are reading, you're actually working, unlike many of us. So for you, the kind of words that I preface this discussion with, that a person might see a poem and not really appreciate the kind of work that goes into it. How do you take a statement like that? How do you see people who are not really aware that it requires work to put out creative creative material?
Thank you. It's good to be here and share a stage with some of my brethren from across the continent. UG I've visited many times, and there's a good poetry scene there. Yeah. I mean, I think if we talk about it within the context of what we do, sometimes it's hard for people to relate. So sometimes the question I like to ask people is if they've had that experience of somebody saying to them, somebody that they've been with for like 15 years, saying to them, "Why do you love me?" And how difficult it is to answer that question. If you understand that difficulty, that's how difficult it is to write a good poem, right? Because if you're able to answer that question, the moment you're asked it and you do it well, you will be loved more intensely for longer from that moment on. Not being able to answer that question, you are going to have to come back and keep giving the reasons. But it's such a thing, it's something that happens over time, and it's really hard to put into words. And what poetry does, it reaches out and tries to put those things into words. So a poem is never perfect, but it's always earnest. It is trying to translate something into something that's already abstract. Language is abstract. So it's never going to hit exactly how you're feeling, but we're always reaching to. And because of the work we do, we get better at it as we do it more. And that's why the perspiration is important, because we're only ever going to be striving, right? Our job as writers is always, we're an apprentice for life, because life is always happening. So you can't keep up. You can't predict the future, so you can't be ready for the moment. You're responding to the moment and trying very hard to reach it at all times. So the work is inherent in the job. And if people don't understand that, that's a kind of their poverty. But we're going to keep doing what we do because we love it, and, you know, I don't know if to call it a blessing or a curse, but it's with us.
Sometimes it looks like a blessing, but I think it's actually a curse. But I think also that I like the fact that you see the poverty of a person who is not able to appreciate art. I think for me it looks like a very desperate kind of poverty, that you can't appreciate art. I mean, you may have a lot of money, but the real poverty is that you look at an art piece or see a poem and it says nothing at all to you. Which I think that it doesn't apply to those gathered here, because we are here for for poetry readings and stuff. But I would like us now to share something, right? Because I mean, we are poets, and I think it's more interesting to listen to your poetry than you talk about the poetry. But first, we'll do that, but very quickly, just give us an idea of the spaces that you've performed in, because all of you have done performances, right? And for you especially, Dagogo, because you are in Ireland, you know, but originally Nigerian, I had a question I wanted to ask about reception. You know, how does your audience receive, an audience that is primarily non-Nigerian?
Yeah.
How do they receive your work? Do you have to put in extra gimmicks for them to understand, or what?
I mean, that is the universal problem of art. Like, someone from Ireland can come to this festival and see, you know, Ghana prints, and the question is like, it's the same to them. How can they relate to something that is not theirs culturally? I think like art especially, and literature, because it's using words and communication, can transcend, you know, that barrier of we come from different cultures, because it's the human experience. Like if I'm writing a poem about, you know, a terrible politician or tribal warfare or love, like those are things that everybody in every part of the world can relate to. And as long as you understand the language I'm speaking, or even if you don't understand the language I'm speaking, you can relate to the emotion that I'm feeling. Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling sad? And you're like, oh, I felt sad, and I felt like exactly like he has before. So like art gives us the opportunity to transcend all those barriers, I think. Yeah, so the reception in Dublin or in Ireland as a whole for my work has been pretty great. It's been pretty outstanding. Just because, you know, it translates. Yeah.
So, in terms of the kind of spaces that you typically would perform, what are they like?
Ooh, it varies. I'm in theaters a lot because I'm also a playwright. So I do a lot of theater stuff, and then festivals as well, obviously. Both like literary festivals and just like music and arts festivals in general. So there's a lot of big ones in Ireland that I've done before. And then, the typical things where you get commissioned to write work for an event or a gig or, some sort of award ceremony or announcement. Those kind of events will be where I'm hired. But I think for me, the places I like to perform the most are places like this, where you have people that, one, appreciate the arts and interest in the arts, and also people that are interested in what the art means, both socially, politically. If they're trying to hear something that's going to move them to become an activist or to go home and come out to their parents or, things like that. I think that kind of art and those kind of spaces are very important.
So, Mitch, let me come to you the same sort of question, kind of spaces that you perform. He has also mentioned the fact of commissioning, because this is something that also happens. A person is commissioned to write a piece, perform a piece, etc.
I'm at a point where I'm selfish with my pieces. I don't know how much money someone would give me to write. At least people reach out to me, but I'm yet to make peace with that because I think I write something and it is so good, and I feel like the art appreciates value with time. So I'm not giving justice to myself as well. So yeah, I don't do commission. Even when I'm to do commissioned work, I'll write then perform, but you're using it for a specific time. But it is my work. So yeah, but I've been to spoken. I've toured East Africa because I've been to spoken word Rwanda. I've done a bit of Sofa. I've done Sofa Kigali, Sofa Nairobi, Sofa Kampala, Sofa Entebbe. I've done Stonefest. A couple of art festivals and currently I run a silent poetry show, like with silent headsets. It's called Mitch's Manifest. It happens twice every year, but 6 October we had like the pilot test for a festival. Yeah, Mitch's Main Fest 2024. So yeah.
No, hang on. You said something that I have to take you on. You said a silent poetry. Was it silent, you said?
Yeah, with the aid of silent headsets, like everyone has a silent headset, we are trying to culture a listening audience, but sometimes you have to forcefully make people listen. But it's also about the experience, because at the point where the artists are not even getting paid enough, the least you can pay them is attention. So it is the whole idea. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's true. At least you can pay his attention. I mean, if you are reading the book, you are bought already. So, I know that it's not just poetry you do. So, I would just restrict this question to your poetry. In terms of performances, I know you fairly well, and so I know that earlier on you had many CDs. Of your poetry released. But beyond that means of dissemination, how do you really interact with the public with your poetry? Where are the spaces that you share your poetry?
I mean, when I was doing a lot of performance, pretty much everywhere. I did like children's festivals, because I write poems for children as well. South Bank Center, all the kind of big I guess public event spaces, New York, London, Berlin, across Europe. I did a European tour actually with a spoken word group that was organized from Switzerland, I think. So yeah, and then there's one time we took over the underground system in, I think it was Munich, something like, it's all kinds of spaces. But it's really about communication. The space itself is not important. It's about the experience that you share with people. I also used to host events in England where you I also did stuff like that in New York as well, where you had musicians and poets. So those kinds of spaces are also interesting because people come you get different audiences who maybe initially come from music and then fall into an appreciation of poetry because it's interspersed with it. Yeah. So, but like I said, it's really about the experience of engaging with audiences and having that communal, almost transcendental experience. You can get a high being on stage. Yeah.
Well, so let's listen to some poetry. Ni also made the allusion to the connection between music and poetry.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, traditionally, there's really no difference between music and poetry. So you find out that many poems written in local languages are infused with music as well. Let's hear something from you.
Okay, I'll pretend like I'm reading, but I'm not going to be reading. But just because I'm sitting down, it feels weird just doing this and performing a poem.
No, but you can stand if you wish.
No, I think
if
it's all right.
not too much to ask.
So this particular poem is called For Black Boys, and it came as a result of a couple of years ago in Dublin, in Ireland, there was I won't call it a gang war, because the black community in Ireland is still quite young. But there was groups of black boys from different localities that were almost at war with each other. And this poem was basically a conversation to them and with them, and like relating it to my own experiences before I left Nigeria, and just like the history of black men in general. Split open the belly of black boys and watch us bleed the color of rust, a consequence of metal men crying on the inside. Split open the belly of the continent and it will bleed all the crippled reasons while the violence is sewn into the coattails of our last names, while we carry both with pride. And our sons inherit this with closed fist. History will always repeat. This is Tutsi versus Hutu. Hausa versus Igbo, Fulani, Borno Kingdom, empires falling like black dominoes, one collapsing the other. I do not know what this is a consequence of. Maybe soldiers never know when the war is over. Making home a battleground for friendly fire. Maybe silhouettes do not make for good fathers, even if they are both black. Maybe if you swap the magnifying glass for mirrors, you realize the problem is us as much as it is them. And by them, I mean us, and by us, I mean them. I do not know what this is a consequence of, but I see the consequences of this. When two elephants fight, the broken earth lasts longer than the bruises. Your brothers will inherit this as expected. Your sisters will learn to love men that would never be good enough for them. Your mother will stay up all night praying you get home all right. Your girl, hoping you do not bring the fire home this time. You see, I hear you. When you say, my niggas got my back, I understand. Not a lot of people understand. And the ones that do, you have to keep them close and safe. I hear you. When you say violence is the first son of poverty and privilege is the father that wasn't there, I hear you. When you say girls love boys that love girls, that prove their worth in red, Prince Charming always has a conquest, leaves behind a trail of bodies. Violence and masculinity are brothers in every fairy tale we've ever heard, yet we wonder where we learned it from. I hear you. When you say you don't even know why you do it, you just do it. Monkey see, monkey do, and if you've been called monkey long enough, you might as well become one. But this is not the end of our story. It's not even the start. Split open the belly of the beast and watch it bleed human. Watch it bleed strong and kind at the same time, because we are more. We are the brick and the mortar. We are the village that raised the child. We are the bone, the marrow, the flesh, the skin, the hair, standing up against the wind, trying to blow us down. We are more than what they say we are. We are truth. Thank you.
Well, so yes, indeed, I agree. We are always more than what they say we are, because, I mean, obviously, we know ourselves much more than anybody would. But so this you wrote this in response
Yes.
to a certain situation.
Yes.
You know, tell me a little bit about that. Give me a little background, because even though you are responding to a situation that was not on the continent, you were making references to violence on the continent. You did mention the Hutsi and Tutsi. You know, and once again, I'm just imagining the carry over to your audience. you
Yeah.
know. Yeah. So first and foremost, just give us an idea as to what the poem was responding to. Give me a little bit more detail.
Yes, like I was saying, there's two localities of so there's a place in Dublin called Tala and there's another place called Blanche. And they are the black boys from the two like different places who usually like meet at parties and stuff like that. And it started becoming a repeated thing where both sides would end up clashing every time they meet, and it became like an unspoken rivalry / an unspoken like gang war, but on a very much smaller scale. And one of my friends was from Tala, and I was speaking to him about it, and he was telling me how it even gets deeper, where they would organize to meet, in secluded areas just to fight each other. And the first thing that came to my mind when he was telling me that was, this is just a repetition of everything that's been happening for the past like 500 years, where, like I said, the Tutsi versus Hutu, or the Hausa and Igbo, the Nigerian Civil War, or basically any civil war on the continent. It's a repetition of like of black men fighting each other without realizing that we should be one. We should be fighting on the same side, not against each other. So this poem was basically trying to speak to that, but letting everything that's happened in the past echo through as well, and let them realize that what you're doing is nothing new under the sun. This is the result of what's happened in the past, and this is the path you're headed. And how about you think about things differently? Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Mitch,
Yes.
I invite a performance or a reading from you.
This piece I'm going to do, it's called Look at Us. It was like the main piece for my performance at Kampala International Theatre Festival last year. I'm trying to address the issues we face as young adults. So it's called Look at Us. But I write from a perspective of Uganda because we make a mockery out of every situation. We try to joke about even a serious situation. So I'm a representative of my society. So this piece is called Look at Us. Yeah, hopefully you enjoy. Yeah. We wanted to be adults so much. Now look at
Us.
Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Well, I'm just working towards Friday and I see what happens next. In a blink of an eye, the weekend is over. The beauty is it lasts longer than most of your relationships. Time is money. Seemed far-fetched because I've been broke most of my lifetime. We wanted to be adults so much. Now look at
Us.
Just another day of please find attached and best of kind regards. Hopefully this email finds you well. Well, spoiler alert, these are just rates packaged well. The best mathematics students in school are still struggling to figure out life, and us who struggled at mathematics after so many failed relationships, it is easier to find your exes. We wanted to be adults so much. Now look at
Us.
I mean, it is easier to get the latest Apple iPhone than to be someone's apple of an eye. Sometimes I'm even pushed to believe Eve left Adam because of an Apple iPhone. It explains why the serpent was airdropped from heaven. It gives a whole new meaning to iCloud. We wanted to be adults so much. Now look at
Us.
the ladies. The ladies will hate guys who give them coins and love guys who give them both good sides of the coin, head and tail. When it comes to relationships, it's all about aesthetics. We keep choosing partners with gym bodies and somehow the relationships will fail to work out. When it comes to friendships, we keep postponing when to catch up until death does us
Part.
We wanted to be adults so much. Now look at
Us.
We have been disappointed most of our life, but somehow we are expected to trust. Yeah? And trust is earned. How are we supposed to earn when we are unemployed? And here every earning is taxed, so we're even scared of earning trust. Yeah? And we are expected to trust the process. Has someone ever bothered to ask the process if it knows we trust it? And trust is supposed to be reciprocated. When will the process start trusting us? They say there is light at the end of the tunnel. Is it hard to light the whole tunnel? Who even knows where the entrance to the tunnel is? We wanted to be adults so much. Now look at
Us.
We are going to be the first generation of parents that don't watch news. I mean, I'm even scared of what I'll leave my children as an inheritance. We'll talk over a few poems, a few vibes, a few writings. We shall be the first generation of sugar daddies without sugar. But luckily enough, we work out and we are healthy, so we shall be the first generation of sugar daddies without diabetes either. We wanted to be adults so much. Now look at us. Everything is about finances. Today, you are financially stable. The next day, yeah, you're contributing towards something. We have hit the highs of highs and lows of lows. I thought rock bottom was supposed to be our foundation, only to realize rock bottom has a basement and people are seated comfortably listening to poetry. We are dream chasers. It explains why every morning we wake up when we are tired. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's a refrain that's going to stay with me for a while. You know, we wanted to be adults so much. Now look at us. Well, so thanks for that, Mitch. Let me turn to you now, Ni. Let's have a poem from you as well.
Okay. I'll read part of a poem because it's kind of long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's called Caress, and it's in, there's a few parts, so I'll just read the first 3 parts of it. It's self-explanatory, so I won't say much about it. If I speak often of gardening and day's slow rise behind the creep of morning sun, it is because somewhere along my thigh lies the memory of a tomato plant's jagged leaf, nibbling at my skin at dawn. Your hand steady at my shoulder, your voice gentle in my ear, pointing out tiny buds that will turn to flower, then fruit. I hold the faded watering can, its silver sharp against my grip, dark as yours, as we wade between beds of onion and kale, lettuce both green and red, aubergines that stand high as my chest. And all the while, time unfurls. Birds bicker in the guava tree behind us, doors crack open, the light spreads, its luster caressing your tight curls as you pull a radish clean out of the soil, shake it and bite through its red skin to the crunch of its white flesh, passing one half to me. We speak nothing, Okomfo, of origins, but I know you planted all these seeds and taught me the tender and the harsh, the art of nurturing them, and this is all I needed to know of love, ever. A morning before sun, the beauty of bud, flower, and fruit, a father's voice with bird song, the tart white secrets in a radish's heart. 2. Between his first word and his first love, a boy goes to Grecian lengths to undermine his mother. His chores undone, he creeps beyond the horizon of her view, past milk bush and fallen rotten petals from bougainvillea, into the haze of dust raised by a fury of youths playing football, waits his turn, while idle tongues run loose with tips on how to love a woman, how to dribble from one foot to the other, scoop the ball up with a touch light as a feather, and strike. All this before he's first called to play. He drops a word he retains from his escapades on bare fields by grass-choked open drains in patches of fruit and flower flecked green of the kind cities hide like armpit hair. In the air when his mother calls, and the hand she means to place on his unkempt head naturally bears no tenderness. He scrambles to shelter by the mongrel that will soon be struck by lightning, the one whose tongue she despises, waits for her rage to cool. Thus begins the tutelage of a man salvaged from masculinity. And now he remembers the strength of her shoulders, her firm riposte, when, because of her short-cropped hair, men dared call her small girl, whistle across the road, caress of her hand on his neck, when she reproved the teacher for caning him for his forthrightness, her anklet of colored beads that never broke. 3. It is easy to be misled when your head lies in the lap of a lover who promises all the things you want your life to be filled with, without so much as a skipped heartbeat. You will learn later that a cricket's vow is not the same as an elephant's, that soft caresses at the pressure point where the ear's flesh meets the skin behind your high cheekbones can shapeshift into something deadly on a whim. But for now, how sweet it is to be loved. You believe it all. You will live in the sun like your grandfather did. Your children will know the thud of avocados and mangoes falling unbidden from trees at dawn. They will speak with your tongue. They will know both your songs. It is easy to forget in those treacle-sweet moments the inflection in your name that signals you have ancestors still old for their hard labor in the split rock and damp of the Americas. How you can't be beholden to the mediocre since your very intestines are echo chambers of dreams swallowed under an umbrella of whips. In the cavern of a kiss, how easily things slide to the back of the mind. Gone your father's lessons on how to fondle fruit, to tease the tender skin with fingers, to fathom the ephemeral line between ripe and rotten. So you are lost, tumbling in a vortex of broken promises, guilt trips, and misused savings. This is what becomes of your heart just before it breaks, and you begin to claw yourself back. Your blood is hybrid, your tongue is mongrel, you carry songs of refuge, refugee mysteries in the loom of maroon shanties that shift language. Your father has been taken, his own father gone, father upon father across borders echo, and the sea waves back. Your skin is weather-beaten, and it absorbs sun, hatred, fire, and shea butter. It doesn't crack. Summertime, and you're still living. Pick up your pieces by the only light that still glows, the fading flower of your mother's smile. Thank you.
Well, my first question, Nee, is what collection is this from? Oh, is this?
This is from The Gaze.
Okay, so yeah, right. And just to mention, I think that he may have some copies of his books available somewhere, certainly from Vidya, I think. And The Gaze, I think, was a really interesting collection in its process, I think. And we heard in this poem, this poem seems to be from a perspective that is developing. This is what I get from it. So it's like we are watching somebody grow through their thoughts, you know. And we've not heard everything in it, but I don't know if I've caught correctly the movement of the poem. Tell us a little bit more about it.
So Caress is really about small things that mean a lot. So, you know, sometimes your skin rubs against something and you don't think about it, and then later you just think, oh, what was it I walked past? Or your skin might rub against something and you might get a rash, and that will remind you very quickly. So the poem was really exploring these things. So for me, my first sense of wonder as a kid was watching plants grow. My father used to plant, and it's kind of amazing as a kid to see the seed, and then soon it's taller than you. You know, so my idea of magic is actually seeing plants grow. That's my first idea of magic, to plant corn, and then later you can get lost in the corn, you know, just walking amongst it. And that for me is like my first sense of wonder. So when I thought about that, I just thought about small moments. So like when, you know, you're walking home, maybe you're in public, you said something bad, and your mother just touches the back of your head slightly. But you know at home it will turn into a beating, right? So it's just all of those little signals that poem is exploring and exploding those ideas of like this little moment and what can it mean. But yeah, just about celebrating those things.
Right, so that was Caress from The Gaze. Now, Dagogo, we titled this Inspiration, Perspiration. I want to know from your work as a poet, a performer, if you were to say where success lies for you, does it lean towards the inspiration or the perspiration? Is it more the ideas that come to you when you are sleeping or the hard work that you do?
That is a good question. Because the honest truth is, like, success lies somewhere between the two. As a writer, and if you think you have like any molecule of talent, you want to do it professionally, then you have to perspire. Obviously, you have to work hard. You can't, you know. Ideally, in an ideal world where you're not thinking about money, you can spend half a year wandering and exploring and experiencing life, and then maybe every so often write 15 lines of poetry. But if you want to do it professionally and exist in this world where you need some sort of financial stability, then you kind of have to be experiencing life and creating at the same time. But I think I would lean more towards the inspiration, and the reason I say that is because, for me, I would rather not be as successful telling the stories I want to tell, than bending towards telling stories that either I don't agree with, or I'm not inspired to write about, or just because I'm trying to get a commission writing things I think they would like. So I think I would lean a little bit more towards the inspiration side. And the funny thing I found about that is, when I lean more into myself and the things that matter to me, I end up coming across like-minded people that were like, I've been thinking about that. No one has said anything about that. Can we work more on this idea and develop it further? So I've been lucky in that sense, where inspiration and the work that I care about has mattered to the right people. Yeah.
Right. Let me come to you, Mitch. Mitch, your background is in science, which you share with Ni Aikwe Parks, actually.
Yeah.
And myself, I'm a pharmacist. Well, I was a pharmacist.
Well, look at you. I mean, this is a panel of scientists.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, are you? I'll bring that back later. But are you escaping from something? So, Mitch, basically, your background is in science, And so when we think about inspiration, one begins to wonder, are you pulling from the background? You spent many years studying science, because you also went to the master's level. And do you pull the inspiration from a scientific background, or does it come from elsewhere?
No, the inspiration comes from life. Some of the things I don't know, I experience them until I start to sit down to try to pen them down, and you're like, oh, actually, this has, I've been in this position and what. So many things, you see them, but you don't notice them. Hopefully that makes sense. So until you write, you're like, oh, actually, yeah,
And when it comes to the inspiration versus perspiration thing, I mean,
this is what I have to say. There are some pieces that I write from inspiration, and I feel them. I love them. Okay, I love them from the start. I'm like, oh, this is nice. But what happens when there is no inspiration? You know what I mean? So like I said in the first, this is a job. There are days you don't want to go to work, you're not inspired. Yeah. But I'm a writer, so I have to write. But all I can say, inspiration, I don't want to downplay it, but one thing I usually tell artists, when you're starting in your career, trying to get as much skills and techniques as possible.
Very true.
Now, condition your brain to write, do anything. Because when the time comes and the inspiration is not there, you're writing from muscle memory. All the skills and techniques you learned along the way. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Okay, so that's an interesting take, because some people will talk about writer's block, and I've not been able to put a word down for months and months because writer's block. I mean, from what you are saying, that's not an option. You should treat it like work. So you unblock the writer's block.
I think these guys can agree with me.
Yeah.
There are some pieces you created and they don't make sense.
Exactly. I was literally about to say that.
But you leave them there. Yeah. But after some time you go back and you're like, actually, this could make sense, and you create more on it. So, yeah.
I think we should be okay with creating bad work and mediocre work. And if it's work that should matter, when you go back to it, it would resonate with you, and you're able to reform it or edit it. But when I have writer's block, I'm very okay writing rubbish until it becomes like gold. Yeah.
I see. Nia, have you also had that sort of experience where something you probably wrote, discarded, and thought wasn't good enough? All of a sudden, sometime down the line, you'd go back and look at it and say, well, this is actually something useful or something good.
I mean, yes. I mean, I don't believe in writer's block. I think if you give a name for something, then we'll just lean to it when we can't. You know, reflection is part of the process. So why are we so beholden to the idea that something should be on paper before you're being creative, right? Our brains don't stop working. So what is writer's block? So that's the way I think about it. You know, I don't subscribe to the idea. I know I have cousins. If I name a new disease, they'll get it tomorrow. And I think it's the same thing with writer's block. Somebody came up with the thing, and everybody is now just using it. Is there a word for writer's block in Ghana? I'm Ghana. Is there a word for it? Somebody help me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
There's no word in my language, so it doesn't exist for me.
Well, I guess it's a good time to bring in the audience as well. If you have any questions or comments for our guests, including if you know in Akan, Ewe, Ga, I mean any Ghanaian language, if you can tell us what writer's block is in that language, we really appreciate it. But the floor is open for questions at this point in time. We'll answer them and then we'll start to wind down the session. If you raise your hand, we'll get you a mic. Yes, please.
Well, thank you so much. Your poems were all incredible. I want to know what element makes a good story a good poetry writing. What are the elements that makes a really good poem?
Obsession with detail. You know, for any poem that you write, just the act of writing means we're using language. You know, when we talk about being scientists, science really is not, it's a discipline, but it's actually just a language. All knowledge is language, right? When somebody breaks their foot, something in their foot, they know they've broken something in their foot. The doctor just has the language to tell them which metatarsal was broken, right? But the person is still the one who knows that their foot is broken. The doctor just has a language for it, and therefore is able to be more accurate. So, you know, our baseline is being human. And so what we try to do, at least I believe we try to do as poets, is to accurately use the abstract thing that language is to express something that we're feeling or we feel in resonance with the world. And so what makes the poem good is the willingness to keep seeking. Not to say, oh, it's almost there, it's fine. But to be like, okay, this is the best I can do with the language I have right now. And because our vocabulary, and when I say vocabulary, I don't just mean words. Our vocabulary of emotional experience as well increases as we grow older, or as we experience more life, then we should get better at translating those feelings through the abstraction of language because our vocabulary is improving. And sometimes we have to push ourselves to get the vocabulary down. And that's why also, you know, we use all the languages at our disposal. So I very much believe if English doesn't have a good enough word for something and I'm writing in English, I can borrow from the other languages that I have and put it in there. And then the English can learn how to speak better by borrowing from us. I mean,
Or you could make up your own words like Shakespeare.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure he stole it from someone, but still, yes.
To expound on what he has said, while it's about expressing emotions, most people forget that it is a creative art form. You know what I mean? Like going ahead to explore the different techniques. I mean, your word playing, your rhyming, your punchlining, your scheming, the metaphors and what. Okay, some I use unconventional techniques. Maybe they are not taught in school or what, because I've never been in school and what. But yeah, I'm just saying at the end of the day, while you're writing about emotions, anyone can talk about the emotions, but it is a creative art form at the end of the day. So yeah.
Hi, can you hear me? So you mentioned something about reflection. You mentioned that you reflect a lot. So basically, you don't encounter creative block, right? So I wanted to know, how is your reflection process like, and how do you know, like, based on this reflection, or like it inspires your writing, basically?
So, I mean, I think reflection, like, it comes automatically. We all have it. It's just that sometimes we have to make quiet time so the reflection can be deeper. Reflection is default for human beings, right? Like calculating reflection is default. If we weren't thinking all the time, if our brains weren't working all the time, we would all be tripping and falling all the time. Because we're actually doing mathematical calculations when we're walking, so we don't bump into each other. So it's that process, it's there. Once you're alive, it's happening. If you die, you can stop reflecting. But like targeted reflection, you have to make time for. And I do that a lot. So, you know, I make time. In the morning, I wake up and I'll lie in bed for an hour just thinking. And yes, it may seem like I'm being lazy, but I'm doing real, you know, world-changing work. Staring at the ceiling. I'm a very serious person with my reflections. It's what I do. But also, you hear this thing about writers drinking. If you're drinking, it can help you reflect. Not just because you see your reflection in the glass, but just, there's a kind of, it lets you let go. Because actually, that's the thing. Most of the time, we're always thinking consequences. If I do this. When people are drinking, they tend to stop thinking about those things. They feel the burn, and they think, oh, that was nice. And then, what does that make me think of? And then it just go off in all directions, which is how I also answer questions. I go off in all directions. I hope that answers your question. Yes.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much for this conversation. My question is about the performance of poetry versus the writing of it, right? So maybe in the definition of a spoken word artist versus I'm a writer, in maybe an identity, or even in how, if you write with speaking it in mind, with performing it in mind in terms of cadences, in terms of tonality, all of those details, or if you write it to be read by others. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So what are the differences or nuances in spoken word poetry versus just being a writer and writing as a poet?
All I can say is when you're writing for stage, this is my difference. Yeah, this is my opinion. It's different from reading. When you're writing, someone will be hearing it like once, like it's one take. When you're on stage, right? But when you're writing for a reader, they will have time to go over and over it. So, I mean, you have to put that in mind when you're trying to, because on stage you want to be understood. You want to be heard and understood. But you have to make sure while you're doing it, everyone understands. So the intonation or how you break it down to make it easy for someone to take it in. But for writing, however complicated, you give someone has the time to go through over and over it again and that. So yeah, I think there is a difference if you put that in mind, because writing for stage is different when you're writing for someone to do.
Just to piggyback off that, actually, because you brought up identity, and it's something that was or is still very divisive in Dublin, in Ireland in general, when it comes to page poetry and stage poetry. And the traditional poetry or literary institutions are still very page poetry, and us that are deemed performers or spoken word artists, we're something separate. And I think it's very important that those walls are being brought down, because at the end of the day, I can take any page poem and perform it with a lot of emotion and give it a cadence I choose to give it. So I don't think the identity should be something that is this so big that both worlds cannot come together. So I think it's very important as well that both worlds come together, especially institutionally. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that the thing we have to remember is that it's an act of communication, right? So just because something's written a particular way on a page doesn't mean that if you're sitting in front of the audience, you have to read it in that way because you're communicating. And I think if you read it exactly how it is on the page in front of an audience, it means you don't respect them because you're not responding. It's like you're not respecting that they're there because you have to watch to see if something's happening. So it should automatically change the cadence. So the same poem, when it's read to an audience, should be different with no other things being added onto it, just the fact that you are talking to a human audience. And I think that this separation that happens is because of a certain arrogance of the academy of saying my poem is this way and expecting to be listened to, right? Because they are more skilled, more talented than you. And it's a very particular classist thing in Europe. Now, when I first started reading poems in England, they would say, you know, some of the people that I sat on stages with were like, why are you performing it? And I'm like, this is how I read, right? Like, I come from a culture where I have to say that I have to give you a reason to listen to me. I can't expect you to listen to me. There are lots of people who are around and have interesting things to do and say, right? So I have to make you want to listen to me. So there, I have to be responsive to the fact that you're in the audience. I have to see if I'm landing, right? And so it's really it's a very, very and it's very new as well. You have to remember this. Poetry as written is very new. Poetry as spoken is older. So that's the granddaddy. So why is it being made to feel like it's the child? You know, and so that's my response to that. I don't really think there's a difference, but I think there are people who have no idea how to read to an audience, how to respond to an audience, because I just call it arrogance. I don't want to add any other adjectives because I could go on. So, yes.
We can take one more question and then we have to wind it up.
Okay, so my name is Vector. Actually, I have two questions. So the first one is, as a writer, so what can I do to like improve on my crafts? And the second one is, does the rhyming of the poem really matter?
That's the rhyming.
Yeah, how the poem rhymes. Because growing up, most of my poems, like, I wanted them to rhyme in a certain way. But growing up, like the emotional poems, I don't care how it rhymes. I just write what I feel. So I want to know, like, is the rhyming of the poem really, really important? Thank you.
Okay, so...
for me personally, rhyming is as important as you want it to be. I'm a hip-hop kid, and my favorite like songs are the ones that don't have rhymes at the end but have internal rhyming schemes. So I'm already used to rhyming not being as specific and dictated, and especially when I started writing poetry as well. One of the reasons I loved poetry was it gave me the freedom to not have to rhyme, because I don't have to be on beat and saying the same like rhyming word at the end of the beat. And that's one of the reasons why I came into the poetry world. So for me, rhyming is as important as you want it to be. I have friends that, for them, their rhyme schemes are the most important thing, and that's a skill, and that's a technique, and that's a talent. But it's not a thing that is necessary for performance or for page poetry. Yeah.
Mitch?
All I can say about rhyming, some people can't control it, yeah? Instead of following the message, they want to follow the rhyme. So they lose the message in trying to catch the rhyme or something. So until you can control it, yeah, it's good when someone is listening to it, but at the end of the day, it has to make sense, yeah? So until you can control it, try to keep it subtle, like 3 lines, 2 lines, and what, until you learn how to control it. Because some people follow the rhyme instead of following the message, yeah? The rhyming is supposed to work for you, not you to work for the rhyme. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah, I think the answer to both of your questions is the message, right? Focus on the message. You'll improve your craft if you are working hard to make sure that the message is accurate. And it's the same thing with the rhyming. If you focus on the message first, the rhyming has to be secondary. But if you've clarified the message and you know what you're saying, you can come back to it and work rhyme into it, because then you will be serving the message rather than serving the rhyme. So focus on that one thing, both for the craft and if you want to use rhyme. I mean, I don't, but, you know, I use it sometimes because there's there's rhythm in language. I mean, so don't forget, language is music anyway, right? So there's rhythm in it already. And forcing rhyme, sometimes what it does is it makes your audience not pay attention to the stuff that you're saying in between because they're anticipating the rhyme. So you also have to remember that. You know, the advantage of a song is somebody can play over and over again. Eventually they'll get the message. If you're doing a poetry performance and it's one night and you've done these rhymes, people are going to remember you were rhyming giraffe with raft or something like that, but they might not remember the words that came before. So, you know, you really just have to make that choice. That if your thing is, I want to write the best thing possible, then it solves all of your problems. I hope that answers the question.
Well, and on that note of rhyme, I have to say we've run out of time. And thank you so very much, Ni Ayikwe Parks, Sabri Mej Dagogo Hart.
Thank you very much
for you for being such a wonderful audience. There's more poetry tonight on this stage from 7:30 p.m. It's just going to be poetry until the festival comes to a close. So there's going to be more poetry performance. Look out for that. But tonight there's Sold Out with Wana Udobank from Nigeria. She's going to be here and give us a performance as well. Let's stay for that. Thank you.
Thank you. That was dope. Whew. Thank you. This was nice. Yeah. Oh, yeah.